They never even try to hide it. From the very first day, Caleb Walker knew he didn't belong, not because he wasn't smart or talented or driven. No, it was because of the color of his skin. He was the only black kid in the entire advanced placement program at West Ridge High, a school tucked deep in a wealthy, mostly white suburb. The kind of place where people smiled at you in public and whispered about you behind closed doors. When Caleb walked into Mr. Henley's AP history class on the first day, the room went silent. Not a curious kind of silence, no. It was cold, heavy, like the air got thicker just because he stepped into it. One of the boys in the back leaned over and muttered, "What's he doing here?" Did they lower the bar or something? Caleb heard it. Mr. Henley heard it. Everyone heard it. But Mr. Henley just kept flipping through the attendance sheet like he didn't hear a damn thing. That was just the start. At lunch, Caleb sat alone. No one invited him to their table. Not even the black janitor would look him in the eye. The school liked to say it was diverse. There were posters with cheesy slogans like unity and diversity all over the hallways, but they didn't mean it. Not really. Not when Caleb asked to join the debate team and was told, "We're full. Try next semester." 2 weeks later, a white kid who could barely speak clearly got in. No problem. Everywhere he went, he was reminded, "You're not one of us." It wasn't just the students either. Teachers treated him like a problem before he even opened his mouth. When Caleb asked a question in chemistry class, Ms. Rigsby gave him a look like he'd just spoken another language. "You're not in the wrong class, are you?" she asked with a fake little smile. That comment stuck with him all day. All week. The real breaking point came 2 months later, during a school field trip. The AP students were visiting the state capitol for a mock legislative session, an opportunity that only a few students were chosen for. Caleb had worked his ass off to get that spot. He prepared for weeks. But when the group arrived at the State House, something happened that changed everything. A security guard stopped Caleb at the door. "I'm with them," Caleb said, pointing to his class. The guard narrowed his eyes. "You sure about that?" Caleb blinked. "Yeah, I'm on the list." The man didn't check the list. Didn't even look. "Step aside," the guard said. "We'll let the real students in first." The other kids, all white, walked past, pretending not to notice. A few snickered. One girl whispered, probably thought he was here to clean. Mr. Henley said nothing. Didn't even look back. Caleb stood there, humiliated, rage bubbling in his chest. But he swallowed it down. Again. He always swallowed it down. But this time, something felt different. Something cracked open in him. He'd spent months trying to prove he belonged, working harder, staying quieter, dressing nicer, never giving anyone a reason to say he was angry or aggressive, but none of it mattered. They didn't see him as a student. They didn't even see him as human. And in that moment, standing outside the building he'd fought so hard to get into, Caleb made a decision. He wasn't going to take it anymore. He was done being silent. Caleb didn't sleep that night. He stared at the ceiling, the scene with the security guard looping in his head over and over again like a broken tape. The sneers, the silence from his teacher, the way his classmates walked right past him like he was invisible. It wasn't just that moment. It was all of it. The quiet racism, the fake smiles, the way they tried to erase him without ever saying his name. But something had changed now. Caleb wasn't going to just survive West Ridge anymore. He was going to expose it. The next morning, he came to school different, focused, calm, like someone with a plan. Because he had one. He started documenting everything. Every slick comment. Every eye roll when he spoke in class. Every time someone said, "I'm not trying to be racist," but followed by something straight out of 1950. He used a voice recorder hidden in his hoodie. He took notes on his phone during class. He even started casually filming conversations, making it look like he was scrolling through TikTok while his camera quietly captured what people really thought when they didn't think he mattered. It didn't take long to get what he needed. One clip showed Mr. Henley grading Caleb's test differently, marking an answer wrong that was word for word the same as another student's. A white student's. Another clip caught a classmate saying, "I bet he only got into AP because of a quota. Probably has like a 2.0 GPA. But the worst. That came during group presentations. Each team was assigned to act out a mock courtroom scene. Caleb had prepped for days, ready to play the defense attorney. But when roles were handed out, one kid, Derek, the football team's golden boy, spoke up. "Can he even be a lawyer?" Derek asked, smirking. "I mean, wouldn't he be more believable as the defendant?" The whole class laughed. Even Mr. Henley cracked a smile before saying, "Let's stay professional, please." Caleb stared at the floor. But he caught it. Every word. Every snicker. And he saved it. Later that week, Caleb tried to report the incident to the vice principal, Mrs. Lancaster, a white woman with a bright red bob and eyes that always looked bored. He told her what Derek said, what Mr. Henley allowed. Mrs. Lancaster let out a long sigh and looked at him like he was the problem. "Caleb," she said, "maybe you're being a little sensitive. I'm sure no one meant it that way. But I have proof," he said. "I recorded it." She froze for a second. Her smile twitched. Then she leaned in and said something that made Caleb's stomach drop. "You know," she said, voice low, "recording people without their consent is actually against school policy. That's a serious offense." There it was. The shift. He wasn't the victim anymore. Now he was a threat. By the time Caleb left her office, he already knew what was coming. Later that day, he got an email. Meeting with school administration. Mandatory. Bring a parent or guardian. The subject line hit him like a punch. They were trying to flip it on him. He went home that night, sat at the dinner table with his mom, and told her everything. Every word, every insult, every time they made him feel small. Then he showed her the videos. She didn't say a word for a long time, just stared at the screen. Then, quietly, she nodded. "Okay," she said. "We fight." What Caleb didn't know was that the next day would change everything. Because the school wasn't just going to punish him. They were going to try and ruin him. Caleb barely slept. His stomach twisted the whole night. Not because he was scared of what the school might do, he was used to fear by now, but because he knew this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about the message they wanted to send. Stay in your place. The next morning, Caleb walked into the front office with his mother beside him. She wasn't the yelling type. She didn't come in swinging. No, she came in calm, controlled, professional. The kind of calm that makes people nervous. The kind of calm that says, "Try me." The office secretary, Miss Trina, gave him a tight smile. "Mrs. Walker, Caleb, the principal will see you shortly." They waited and waited. 25 minutes later, they were finally called in. Principal Jennings sat behind a massive oak desk, flanked by Vice Principal Lancaster and a district administrator Caleb had never seen before. It felt like a courtroom. And Caleb already knew. He wasn't the plaintiff. He was the one on trial. Jennings cleared his throat. "Caleb, we've been made aware of multiple incidents where you used unauthorized recording devices during school hours. That's a clear violation of school policy." Caleb opened his mouth, but Jennings held up a hand. "Let me finish." He looked at Caleb's mom. "These recordings include both staff and students, without consent. That's a legal gray area, and we've spoken to our district legal team. At best, it's unethical. At worst, it's a punishable offense." Mrs. Lancaster jumped in. "We're recommending suspension. Possibly expulsion, depending on how the board reviews the situation." Caleb's mom leaned forward. "So let me get this straight. A student gets verbally harassed, mocked in class, ignored by staff, and racially profiled on a school trip. He collects evidence because no one listens. And your response is to punish him." Jennings didn't blink. "We have procedures for reporting misconduct." Caleb did not follow them. "He did report it," she snapped. "And you told him he was being too sensitive." The room went silent. Mrs. Lancaster shifted in her seat. That's when Caleb spoke. "I recorded everything because I knew you'd never believe me otherwise. Because every time something happened, someone like you told me to just ignore it, or smile through it, or be grateful." He pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table. "There are 12 recordings on here. 4 of them are teachers. 2 of them are students saying slurs. One of them is Mr. Henley laughing when someone called me a criminal." Jennings didn't touch it. Caleb leaned in. "But here's the part you'll care about. One of them is you, Mrs. Lancaster. When you told me recording people was worse than racism, her face drained of color. And I've already sent copies to the district, to my lawyer, and to 3 local news outlets. Now Jennings looked uncomfortable. Caleb's mom smiled for the first time. You said this could be unethical, she said. Great. Let's see how the court of public opinion feels about your ethics. After the meeting, the tone changed. Fast. Emails started flying. Phone calls. The principal suddenly wanted to reconsider the disciplinary action. Mrs. Lancaster disappeared for the rest of the week. But it wasn't over. Because while the school tried to control the damage, the story was already spreading. Parents started talking. Students whispered in hallways. Caleb's phone blew up with messages, some supportive and some ugly. Screenshots of his recordings leaked. A few local activists caught wind. And then a journalist, one of the ones Caleb had emailed, reached out. She wanted to run his story. Caleb hesitated. This wasn't just a school fight anymore. This was going public. If he said yes, he'd be known as that black kid who exposed Westridge. The thought terrified him. But then he remembered Derek's voice saying, wouldn't he be more believable as the defendant? And Mr. Henley laughing. And Mrs. Lancaster telling him he was the problem. He called a reporter back. Let's do it, he said. The story broke faster than Caleb could ever imagine. The next day, the local newspaper ran an article titled Westridge High's Hidden Racism. One student fights back. The headline was everywhere, on the front page, shared on social media, even splashed across the TV news. It was like a bomb had gone off in his life. And Caleb had no idea just how much damage would come from it. At school the following day, it felt like the walls were closing in. Some kids avoided him. Others whispered and pointed. A few even congratulated him for standing up. But it wasn't the praise that made him uncomfortable. It was the looks of fear. People treated him like he was a ticking time bomb now, like his fight for justice could explode at any second. Then there were the phone calls. By lunch, Caleb had at least 5 missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize. His mom didn't answer them either. She knew that any random number was probably someone trying to push him into a bigger fight than he was ready for. But there was one call he couldn't ignore. It was from the local news station. Hello, Caleb. We'd like to invite you for an interview tomorrow at 7 p.m. Your story's gaining attention nationwide. We want to give you a platform to speak out about what's happening at Westridge, the reporter said. It was a big opportunity. But Caleb hesitated. What if it made things worse? What if they twisted his words? What if his life turned into a circus? Still, he knew that this wasn't just about him anymore. This wasn't about revenge or winning some petty fight. This was about standing up for every black kid who had ever been pushed to the side. So he agreed. That night, he sat down with his mom and ran through his speech. Just be honest, Caleb, she said. Tell them exactly what happened. Tell them how it felt. It was the first time Caleb truly felt seen by someone outside of his small circle. For the first time in weeks, the weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter. He wasn't alone in this anymore. The next evening, Caleb stood in front of the camera. The studio lights were blinding, and he could feel his palms sweat. The interviewer, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an air of professionalism, smiled at him. Caleb, thank you for coming in tonight. Your story has caught the attention of not only your community, but of people all across the country. Tell us, how did this all begin for you? He took a deep breath and began. He talked about his experiences, how from day one, the racism at Westridge had been so normalized, it was almost invisible to everyone but him. He spoke about the microaggressions, the lack of support, the way he'd had to prove himself over and over again. Then he brought up the key moment, the field trip, the security guard, and the complete lack of support from his teacher. He showed the reporter the clips from his recordings. The school told me to keep quiet, he said, his voice steady now. They told me to stop making trouble, to stop being sensitive. But that's not right. They want me to forget everything they did to me and pretend it's all okay. But it's not. The reporter nodded, her face solemn. We've seen the clips you've provided. It's clear that your experience has been heartbreaking. But now the school is responding, Caleb. They're calling your recordings a violation of their policies. They've even mentioned the possibility of expulsion. How do you feel about that? Caleb felt a lump form in his throat. He'd known this was coming. They're not mad about the recordings, Caleb said. They're mad because they were exposed. They're mad because they don't want anyone to know how bad it really is. And if I have to lose everything to show the world what's happening, then so be it. The interview aired that night. The response was immediate. At first, it was all shock. People in the community couldn't believe what they were hearing. Teachers, students, parents, they all had an opinion. Some of them stood with Caleb, calling for accountability from the school. Others, however, made their voices loud too. Why is he making such a big deal? He's just looking for attention. Everyone's so sensitive these days. Why not just let it go? But the most dangerous ones were the quiet ones, the ones who were just waiting for Caleb to crack, to see if the truth would hurt him enough to make him back down. And sure enough, the pressure started building. Caleb's mom got a phone call at work. They were offering her a settlement. They wanted Caleb to apologize and retract his statements, and in return, they'd go easy on him. They would remove the suspension and sweep the whole thing under the rug. But Caleb knew better now. He wasn't backing down. The following week, the board called Caleb and his mother in for a meeting. They wanted to discuss a resolution. But Caleb wasn't interested in resolving anything quietly. He was done being their scapegoat. The boardroom was packed, and they had lawyers. Caleb had his mom and his resolve. But something was different this time. The tension in that room felt like it could snap at any moment. The boardroom was a battlefield. Caleb sat across from the school's legal team, the principal, and a handful of other administrators. His mother was beside him, calm and determined, the only force holding him together in a storm of anger and tension. They thought they could silence him. They thought they could bully him into submission. But Caleb wasn't the same kid anymore. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for every student, every black person, every kid who had ever been told to shut up and be grateful. The principal started. Caleb, we've reviewed your claims. We acknowledge there were some inappropriate comments made by certain individuals. But we also have to consider the bigger picture here, which is, Caleb cut in. The disruption, the principal said, clearly trying to regain control. Your actions have caused an uproar in the community. This media circus is not helping anyone, least of all you. We're offering you a chance to resolve this quietly, with no permanent damage to your academic record. Let me get this straight, Caleb said, standing up. You're telling me you'll drop the suspension, but only if I apologize for speaking the truth? If I take everything back and pretend this never happened? The room went quiet. Caleb's voice wasn't loud, but the weight of his words hit hard. You're asking me to accept that racism is just something I should deal with. That the system that's supposed to protect me is actually the one that enables it. No, I'm not backing down. His mom placed a hand on his shoulder. This is the last chance for you to do the right thing, she said to the board. You either stand with him or against him. The principal shifted in his seat. We cannot have this kind of publicity. It's damaging to the school's reputation. Maybe the reputation needs to change, Caleb said, his voice unwavering. Maybe it's not about saving face. Maybe it's about admitting that the system is broken. That was when the district administrator spoke up. He was the one who had remained quiet the entire meeting, but now his cold, calculated tone sent a chill through the room. If you don't retract your statement, if you don't apologize for what you've done, there will be consequences, Caleb. This could affect your future, your college applications, your entire career. The threat was clear. They were trying to intimidate him. But Caleb didn't flinch. I'll take the consequences, he said, if that's what it takes to make things right. The next few days were chaos. The media coverage exploded, the public debate between free speech and maintaining decorum hitting every corner of the internet. Caleb's story was now a nationwide conversation. People from across the country were debating whether what he had done was brave or reckless. Some supported him completely. Others attacked him as being an instigator. But no one could ignore what he'd done. And the school couldn't either. In a final meeting with the school board, Caleb's mother stood tall as the principal announced that the district would not expel him. They couldn't afford to expel a student who had brought so much attention to their practices, not with public scrutiny at its peak. Instead, they offered a compromise. They'd officially clear Caleb of any wrongdoing. The suspension would be lifted, and he'd receive a formal apology. But Caleb wasn't interested in their apologies. He wanted something more than words. He asked for real action. I want diversity training for all staff. I want a proper review of the school's disciplinary policies. And I want the school to publicly commit to creating a space where kids like me don't have to fight for basic respect. The board went silent. But after a tense few moments, the principal finally spoke. We will comply with those requests. Caleb stood. He looked the principal in the eye. That's not just for me. That's for the next kid who's going to come here and face the same thing I did. The meeting ended with no further confrontation. Caleb had gotten what he came for. That night, Caleb and his mom sat in the kitchen, exhausted but victorious. His phone buzzed non-stop with messages of support. A few people in the community still hadn't come around, but that didn't matter anymore. Caleb knew that he'd made a difference. He had won. But it wasn't the victory he'd hoped for. It was the realization that the fight had just begun. He hadn't just taken on the school. He'd taken on the system that had tried to suppress him his entire life. And it wasn't going to stop with just one school. Caleb's story had sparked a conversation. And now people were listening. And for the first time, Caleb felt like maybe, just maybe, things are going to change. Then,